In Rajadamnern Stadium in Bangkok, an overconfident young Muay Thai title holder was preparing to challenge his ego against the burden of tradition. What started as a celebration of heritage became lethal when the unbeatable talent insulted an icon and insisted on a match. Chuck Norris wasn't an ordinary spectator at ringside. Over many years, he had been a martial arts legend, a global karate winner, and a film hero famous for accuracy and restraint. His roundhouse strike echoed the restraint developed through years of practice. When the cocky competitor challenged him in front of the crowd, he didn't realize he was summoning evaluation from an expert. Chuck stood with serene determination, and his initial quiet strides to the ring held greater significance than numerous triumphs. What ensued was a deliberate reply that would crush ego, subdue a country's hero, and spark a worldwide online frenzy. What originated as a juvenile act of derision evolved into a teaching on honor. The venue and the vast audience who observed would always recall the evening when hubris encountered myth, and the opening strike concluded it. Prior to continuing, share your location with us, and if this tale resonates with you, ensure you're following, as I've prepared something unique for tomorrow. The Rajadamnern Stadium throbbed with vitality on this muggy night in Bangkok, a hub of clamor and eagerness. Banners from various countries waved overhead. Flashes from devices sparkled like fireflies, and the aroma of offerings blended with perspiration. This evening was exceptional. The international Muay Thai event uniting icons and emerging talents in one space. The vibe coursed through the full house like current, countless shouts blending into one massive sound. Noi Phan Priya, the stadium's seasoned host, bent toward her mic. Her tone rose over the uproar with refined accuracy. Everyone, this evening we observe the meeting of eras, the insight of maturity versus the passion of inexperience. She halted, allowing the audience's cheer to grow before proceeding. This evening we honor the discipline that has shaped Thailand for ages. Close to the forward seats, unaffected by the surrounding disorder, was Chuck Norris. At 78, his aura bore the subtle gravity of peaks. He had on a plain, dark-collared top, his seasoned palms placed easily on his legs. Unlike the stars and officials nearby who conversed and smiled for shots, Chuck remained in reflective quiet, his stare fixed, centered on the platform where the timeless craft would shortly commence. A youthful Thai supporter close by poked his companion, indicating, "That's Chuck Norris over there," he murmured with awe. "He appears so ordinary," his buddy responded, disillusionment tinting his words. "That's the essence," the initial supporter stated. "The genuinely formidable ones never have to display it." The main illumination faded abruptly, and beams danced over the venue. The audience's cheer transitioned to a waiting stillness as classic Thai tunes occupied the area. The eerie notes of the reed instruments preparing the scene for the upcoming event. Stepping onto the platform first, Noi declared, her tone rich with esteem. "A figure who has upheld our customs for 30 years. The retired title holder who has stood for Thailand worldwide. The mentor of winners and protector of our legacy. Somsak the Bull Charanrang." The audience stood in polite clapping as an elder competitor appeared. At 45, Somsak proceeded with the intentional poise of someone who had accepted the flow of years. His features displayed the traces of countless contests. A bent nose fractured repeatedly, fibrous marks near his eyes, and lobes expanded from enduring impacts. Still, he held himself with evident poise, executing the classic Y-Crew ceremony with gradual exact actions that reflected years of commitment. Chuck shifted ahead a bit, the initial alteration in his position since arriving. His gaze tracked Somsak's ceremony with silent regard, one expert acknowledging another, and his rival. Noi went on, her inflection adjusting faintly. The invincible emerging talent from Thailand, the quickest competitor in Asia, the one dubbed Lightning, Thanchai Jerawan. The venue's beams pulsed quickly as modern beats abruptly thundered from the audio system. A youthful competitor leaped into sight, covered in a sparkling cloak decorated with thunder symbols. At 23, Thanchai had the ideal mix of velocity, strength, and risky assurance that creates victors. His form was a toned structure of sinew, unscathed by major harm, his actions dynamic even during his arrival. Instead of conducting the classic Y-Crew with solemnity, Thanchai hurried through a showy variant, adding street dance elements that elicited yells and applause from junior admirers. He engaged the audience relentlessly, gesturing to his backers, sending air kisses to females near the edge, and showing a dazzling grin that had secured him endorsement contracts throughout Asia. As the official summoned both to the middle for guidelines, the difference was unmistakable. Somsak inclined his head courteously, palms in the standard greeting pose. Thunchai hopped on his feet, blinking at the lenses, scarcely attending to the official. "You ought to have remained withdrawn, elder," Thunchai whispered in Thai, sufficiently audible for Somsak to catch, but not the authorities. Somsak's look stayed steady. "Allow your abilities to express themselves," he answered plainly. "Oh, they shall," Thunchai sneered audibly. From his position, Chuck observed the interaction, interpreting the postures like text. His eyes tightened a little, the sole sign he noted the insolence developing. The signal sounded, its sharp tone piercing the venue's hum. Somsak advanced in the standard posture, even and controlled. Thunchai, though, burst from his side with alarming swiftness, instantly advancing with a series of attacks that pushed the senior competitor toward the barriers. "Observe that quickness," Noi exclaimed, expert thrill in her tone, lightning fulfilling his title. The audience cheered as Thunchai connected a sharp sequence. Straight punch, hook, shin strike that evidently shook Somsak. The experienced fighter regrouped swiftly, adopting his protective stance, aiming to endure the initial onslaught, as he had in endless prior bouts. He deflected a raised strike, replying with a firm overhand that briefly halted the progress. But the junior competitor merely grinned, dismissing the impact. "Is that everything?" he provoked in Thai, loud enough for the nearby rows to overhear. In that instant, a trace crossed Somsak's expression. Not alarm, but a melancholy awareness, the understanding that age spares no combatant, that the pace of youth ultimately surpasses even the finest method. Thunchai capitalized on his edge, his blows a haze of exactness and force. A jumping joint hit Somsak squarely on the jaw, causing him to stumble. The audience inhaled together. Rather than advancing to conclude, Thunchai retreated, orbiting, toying with his target. He looked toward the elite area, confirming the notables were viewing his show. His gaze lingered briefly on Chuck Norris, whose demeanor stayed neutral, appraising. Something regarding that constant stare irritated Thunchai like an unreachable irritation. He redirected his focus to Somsak with fresh intensity. "Your era is done," Thunchai murmured as they gripped momentarily. "Observe how it's handled today." Somsak offered no reply. Preserving his stamina, seeking gaps that were narrowing quicker than during his peak, he delivered a return slash that created a minor wound above the eye. A symbolic success that was short-lived. Thunchai brushed off the fluid, his grin shifting to something harsher. He inclined his head as if deciding, then released a chain of attacks so rapid they appeared to merge. Right shin to the thigh, left strike to the torso, right slash curving toward Somsak's side. The senior evaded the slash, but stepped right into an elevated strike he hadn't anticipated. The collision resounded across the venue, a disturbing smack that lifted the audience in astonishment. Somsak fell to the floor, his frame abruptly slack. The official hurried forward, signaling to halt the contest even as Thunchai readied to leap on his downed rival. Health workers flooded the platform, breathing aid ready, the audience's thrill yielding to worried whispers as Somsak stayed immobile. Chuck Norris rose a touch, worry fleeting across his traits before reverting to their usual serenity. He observed closely as the health group operated, not reseating until Somsak's lids blinked open. Meanwhile, Thunchai paraded the platform, limbs elevated, engaging the audience as though a person wasn't receiving care for severe head trauma nearby. Upon noticing that Somsak had recovered awareness rather than displaying comfort, he indicated and chuckled. "Who's following?" he yelled in English, ensuring the foreign viewers comprehended. This is the outcome when relics refuse to vanish. The audience's feedback divided. Junior supporters applauded enthusiastically for their fresh idol. Senior observers fidgeted restlessly, sharing uneasy looks. This wasn't the spirit of Muay Thai, not the deference the craft required. But Thunchai appeared indifferent, as Somsak was assisted cautiously off the platform, depending greatly on the health workers. Thunchai seized the mic from the host's grasp. "That's how it's done in 2025, he proclaimed, his tone reverberating through the space. "No further outdated methods, no more dull customs. This is combat for the modern era." His sight swept the audience, drawing from their vigor until it fixed again on Chuck Norris, who had resumed his place, face indecipherable. In that instant, a spark ignited in Thunchai, a desire to overcome this ultimate emblem of the prior generation. There sat Chuck Norris, the myth, observing him with those tranquil eyes that displayed neither endorsement nor criticism. It troubled him beyond words. Amid the venue's increasing disorder, as spectators debated the scene they'd observed, Chuck remained in absolute tranquility, a haven of peace in turmoil. His seasoned palms lay gently on his knees, his respiration unaltered despite the brutality he'd seen. And although nobody could foresee it at that point, in that serene interval before the upheaval, the true contest of the night was on the verge of starting. Fluid marked the surface in narrow red paths where Somsak had dropped. Venue personnel swiftly cleaned it, but not prior to Thanchai treading through during his success circuit, creating scarlet imprints like an archaic battle ritual. The senior competitor was now concealed in the treatment zone, encircled by worried expressions and the signals of diagnostic tools. The quiet that had descended after his fall was swiftly replaced by the venue's revived spirit, as Thanchai kept energizing the audience. "Let's applaud the coming era," he declared into the mic he'd taken from Noi. "Let's applaud genuine combat." Numerous in the group reacted eagerly, especially the junior admirers who had arrived for display over heritage. Devices stayed lifted, recording each segment of Thanchai's festivity, guaranteeing his act would saturate online platforms shortly. "That's 25 consecutive successes," Thanchai proceeded, striding the platform like a confined hunter. "Nobody reaches lightning. Nobody approaches." In the elite zone behind him, Chuck Norris stayed still. Unlike those nearby who were either applauding fervently or averting in revulsion, Chuck merely examined. His sight followed Thanchai's actions with the judgment of someone who had observed thousands of competitors rise and fall over years. Thanchai met that constant stare once more and stumbled in his words. Something about the elder's serene examination pricked him, embedding under his surface like a fragment. In every past win, rivals, instructors, and guides had exhibited obvious feelings: rage, irritation, occasionally reluctant admiration. But Chuck's expression disclosed nothing, as if the impressive display had been simply anticipated. Commonplace. It kindled something hazardous in the youthful competitor. "I notice we have notable guests tonight," Thanchai stated, his tone falling to a feigned reverent pitch as he neared the chords closest to Chuck. "Individuals who gained fame before many of you existed." A whisper spread through the group. The host, Noi, advanced as if to retrieve her mic, but Thanchai dismissed her with a quick motion. "I spot Chuck Norris there," he went on, directing straight at Chuck, the icon in person, the one who battled Bruce Lee. "What, half a century back?" He snickered, urging the audience to participate in his ridicule. Some chortled uneasily, uncertain if this overstepped. Others observed with rising unease. Chuck's demeanor stayed unaltered. "Inform me, Mr. Norris," Thanchai urged, encouraged by the absence of reply. "How does it seem to view actual competitors nowadays? It must resemble observing an entirely new activity from what you performed in your monochrome films, correct?" A collective gasp swept the venue. Even those who had supported Thanchai shortly before appeared stunned at the outright insolence toward a martial arts pioneer. Noi's complexion paled as she grasped the unfolding. This wasn't in any plan, any arranged amusement. This was a youthful title holder intoxicated by success and spotlight, breaching limits no Thai competitor would normally venture. "You know," Thanchai persisted, embracing his subject, "I matured listening to all these Chuck Norris quips. Chuck Norris doesn't perform push-ups. He shifts the planet downward." He imitated the action derisively. "Chuck Norris tallied to endless twice. Chuck Norris can slay 2 rocks with 1 foul." Some anxious chuckles spread through the group, but they rang empty, awkward. Individuals shared glances, detecting the impropriety of the situation. "But observe him currently," Thanchai declared, his tone stiffening. "Merely another aged individual. What are you now, 75, 80? Do you even recall how to form a grip anymore, veteran?" In the deep hush that ensued, you could nearly detect the venue's shared pulse. All focus switched between the bold young competitor and the seated icon. Chuck still didn't stir. His respiration stayed even, his stare constant. If the barbs affected him, he showed no indication. "I wager you couldn't endure 30 seconds on this surface today," Thanchai pushed, annoyed by Chuck's poise. "Not against a true competitor. Not against someone who doesn't hold back for the lens." From the treatment zone came a uniformed physician who neared Noi and murmured in her ear. She assented gravely before advancing, trying to regain command of the scenario. Everyone, she proclaimed, attempting to signal for another mic since Thanchai retained hers. We have confirmation that Somsak the Bull Charonrang is steady and alert. He will be moved to medical facility for cautionary measures. Nobody concerns themselves with past competitors. Thanchai cut in, eliciting gasps from the purists in the group. They collapse, they shatter, they're overlooked. That's the nature of things. A jeer echoed in parts of the venue, the initial adverse feedback Thanchai had faced that evening. It appeared to startle him briefly before he intensified, directing again at Chuck. You desire to witness something memorable? How about this? I'm challenging Chuck Norris right here, immediately. Thanchai's tone escalated to a yell as he performed for the lenses. Come on, Chuck, one session. Demonstrate if those film maneuvers function in an authentic contest. Or are you too occupied tinting your facial hair nowadays? The group's atmosphere changed noticeably. Some junior admirers hooted and applauded at the boldness, while others remained in awkward quiet. A handful started intoning Chuck's name, not to urge combat, but as a display of esteem against the barrage of rudeness. Chuck, Chuck, Chuck. The intonation expanded, propagating like flames through arid field. Soon, half the venue had adopted it, the noise growing into a boom that appeared to vibrate the structure's base. Thanchai's grin wavered a bit, but he regrouped swiftly. Hear that? They desire to witness it as well. Come on, veteran. One session with lightning. Let's observe what occurs when myth encounters truth. Still, Chuck did not reply. His eyes never departed Thanchai, but neither did they disclose fury or affront. They merely observed, evaluated, gauged. Authorities discussed hastily at the edge. Evidently unsure how to manage the unusual circumstance, the occasion organizer motioned wildly from the control zone, sliding a digit across his neck in the common signal to mute the audio. But Thanchai kept it distant from anyone attempting to near. What's the issue, Chuck? He mocked, tone lowering to a staged murmur that still resonated through the venue. Scared I'll injure you? Scared I'll reveal to all that Chuck Norris is merely a fable? Just an aged man with a color treatment and some online segments. The intonation intensified, more pressing. Chuck, Chuck, Chuck. In the forward row, a Thai authority leaned to Chuck, speaking softly. Chuck provided the tiniest shake of his head, eyes never leaving Thanchai. The young competitor witnessed this exchange and misconstrued it, his expression brightening with victory. Observe that. He's declining. The icon is frightened. He performed for the lenses again, creating a pretended, terrified expression. Can't fault you. At your years, wouldn't want you fracturing a joint. Better adhere to ads for workout gear, right? The intonation hesitated a little as doubt rippled through the group. Would Chuck merely permit this rudeness to persist without response? Assembling and readying this tale required considerable effort from us. So if you're appreciating it, join our channel. It signifies much to us. Now returning to the tale. In this interval of doubt, Thanchai committed his ultimate critical error. This is what transpires when relics don't remain concealed, he announced, making a rejecting motion toward Chuck. Your period is finished, veteran. This is our period now. We're quicker, tougher, superior than you ever were. He pivoted away from Chuck, a purposeful ultimate affront in martial arts tradition, indicating a rival wasn't worth observing, wasn't worth honoring as a danger. And then in the abruptly silent venue, Chuck Norris arose. The action was seamless, leisurely, yet it seized every gaze. There was no embellishment, no clear show of purpose. He merely stood with the smooth simplicity of a man much younger. The group's response was immediate. Inhalations followed by a surge of device lenses rising further, followed by complete, breathless quiet. Thanchai, detecting the alteration, rotated gradually back toward the elite area. His arrogant smile stiffened, then weakened as he viewed Chuck upright, serenely extracting his timepiece and stowing it in his pocket. Oh, Thanchai uttered, an anxious chuckle leaving him. Now we're progressing. Approaching to clasp my palm, veteran. Congratulate me appropriately. But Chuck wasn't heading to the platform. Not immediately. With systematic exactness, he shed his dark-collared top, arranging it tidily and passing it to a stunned aide. Beneath, he had a basic dark undershirt that displayed limbs lined with compact muscle. Not the flashy volume of youth, but the matured strength of a man who had never ceased practicing, never ceased revering his craft. Thanchai's look shifted between entertainment and the initial hint of doubt. This wasn't the response he had foreseen. There was no outrage, no vocal retort, no ruffled honor, just silent, concentrated readiness. Everyone, Noy abruptly declared, having secured another mic. Please stay composed. We are facing an unforeseen occurrence. Even her expert tone quivered a touch. Chuck started walking to the platform, his speed unhurried, his respiration steady. The group separated before him like fluid, admirers withdrawing nearly with veneration to open his route. Nobody uttered. Nobody ventured to shatter the enchantment of the instant with plain terms. With each stride Chuck made, Thanchai's confidence visibly lessened. He retreated a bit on the platform, glancing about as if abruptly recalling he was encircled by thousands of observers. "Hey, I was merely jesting," he stated, his tone missing its prior assurance. "Just energizing the audience, you understand? No offense meant." Chuck persisted in his advance, his expression revealing nothing, neither wrath nor expectation. He proceeded like a man who had reconciled with conflict years ago, who grasped its role and intent, who had no urge to hasten toward or from it. When he arrived at the stairs to the platform, authorities advanced hesitantly. Trapped between rules and the undeniable importance of the moment, Chuck halted, gazing at the closest authority, a mute inquiry. The individual wavered, then moved aside with a polite, broad motion as Chuck ascended the stairs. The venue burst into fresh intonation. "Chuck! Chuck! Chuck!" The noise was overwhelming now, a tangible power that seemed to thrust against the barriers and roof. Yet inside that circle of surface, time appeared to decelerate, existence narrowing to just two individuals, one who had pursued acclaim through conceit, and one who had discovered it through restraint. Thanchai retreated another pace, the mic dangling overlooked at his side. For the initial time, the group saw something fresh in his look: dread. Chuck Norris positioned at the platform's border, one palm resting softly on the upper cord. The venue's beams captured the gray in his facial hair, the creases of background carved into his features, not as signs of frailty, but as a chronicle of a life thoroughly experienced. He didn't instantly step in, instead considering the limit before him with what seemed like deliberate reflection. This instant of wavering gave Thanchai a chance to reclaim some of his confidence. He'd never withdrawn from a test. It wasn't his character. That brief trace of doubt converted back into his signature arrogant smile, though it didn't fully reach his gaze now. Well, he uttered, rediscovering his tone. The myth truly wants to enter the platform." He hopped lightly on his toes, loosening his joints, the staged actions of a competitor warming up. "You certain about this, veteran? I don't believe your health plan includes what's forthcoming." A few uneasy chuckles echoed through the group, but they were swiftly quieted by the bulk's disapproving whispers. The mood had transformed. Thanchai no longer directed the space's vigor. All attention, all esteem had moved to the serene shape at the platform's border. Authorities discussed urgently at the edge. This wasn't scheduled, wasn't approved, wasn't insured. The occasion organizer made desperate cutting gestures across his neck, indicating to guards to step in. But when two sturdy guards neared Chuck from the rear, planning to softly guide him back to his place, something extraordinary occurred. They halted several paces distant, abruptly reluctant or incapable to contact him. It wasn't that Chuck had shifted or spoken. There was merely a presence of total surety around him that made meddling feel improper. One guard even retreated a step, then provided a minor bow of esteem before withdrawing. Chuck's concentration never strayed from Thanchai. The ring host Noi neared the platform base, her expert manner tense but intact. "Everyone, this is not a planned demonstration. We must request Mr. Norris to go back to his place." And Thanchai disrupted, dismissing her. "The crowd wants to view it. I want to view it." He aimed his following words at Chuck, bending over the cords. "Don't fret, I'll take it light on you. Wouldn't want to harm an elder." Chuck stayed mute, his respiration constant, his eyes never departing Thanchai. There was no fury in his stare, no injured ego seeking repair. If anything, there was a form of empathy, the expression of an instructor who perceives a learner requiring adjustment. The lead official entered the platform, nearing Thanchai to converse in pressing, low volumes. Thanchai shook his head multiple times, motioning dismissively. Their talk intensified, the official indicating toward Chuck with clear worry. "He's an aged man." The official was audible, saying, "This isn't appropriate. This isn't how we display esteem to icons." Thanchai chortled. "He desires this. Observe him. The man's essentially requesting it." He elevated his tone, aiming it at Chuck once more. "Aren't you, veteran? You want to check if the myths are accurate? If Chuck Norris can truly execute a roundhouse strike quicker than lightning?" During this interaction, Chuck stayed entirely motionless, a contrast to Thanchai's agitated motion. When he ultimately acted, it wasn't to counter the provocations, but to slip smoothly between the cords and step onto the platform with the effortless elegance of a man who had done so innumerable times. The group burst again, devices and lenses flashing in a burst of illumination. Security lined the platform now, unsure whether to interfere or merely observe whatever was about to happen. "All right, folks," Thanchai proclaimed, drawing from the vigor, orbiting Chuck like a stalker. "You're about to observe history, the day lightning felled an icon." Chuck positioned in the platform's center, limbs relaxed by his flanks, observing Thanchai's motion with serene evaluation. His stance was neither offensive nor protective, merely existent, rooted in the instant. The contrast between them couldn't have been sharper. Thanchai hopped, posed, engaged the audience with overstated motions. Chuck stayed still, saving stamina, revealing nothing. One pursued the audience's approval. The other had no requirement for it. Noi had withdrawn to the edge, discussing urgently with production team. The planned agenda was unraveling before her, and there seemed no halting what was developing. She grasped her mic with expert acceptance. "Everyone," she declared, tone more stable now. "It seems we are observing an unplanned display. Please stay seated." And she paused, seeking suitable terms. "And exhibit esteem for what you are about to observe." Thanchai kept orbiting, his starting bravado slowly changing into a competitor's measured judgment. For all his conceit, he was no novice in battle. He had ascended to the peak because under the spectacle lay real ability and strategic acumen. "No arbiter, no regulations," he proclaimed to Chuck, reducing his tone so only those nearest could overhear. "You sure you want to proceed, Elder? Not too tardy to depart with your honor." Chuck ultimately spoke, his tone unexpectedly gentle, yet resonating clearly through the quiet venue. "You've confused notice for esteem. 5 terms, presented without passion, without critique, a plain observation given as one might remark on the climate. Yet they impacted with greater force than any bodily hit, slicing through Thanchai's act to the uncertainty below." Thanchai's eyes constricted, his grin solidifying into something less appealing. Esteem is gained on the surface. Not in films, not in tales, not in online humor. Chuck inclined his head a touch, recognizing the statement without concurring. "Then allow your abilities to express," he stated, mirroring Somsak's prior terms to Thanchai before their contest. Something flickered across Thanchai's features, perhaps awareness or a brief shame swiftly quelled. He loosened his joints again, grounding himself. "Fine," he uttered, tone falling to a perilous level. "Abilities it is." He surged ahead without alert, unleashing a dazzlingly swift sequence that had overpowered every past rival. Straight punch, hook, elevated strike. Each method performed with ideal shape and crushing force. Chuck didn't withdraw. He didn't shield defensively. He simply wasn't where the blows connected. With least motion, he evaded the punches by fractions and redirected the strike with a subtle forearm adjustment. Thanchai blinked in astonishment but advanced with another sequence. This one lower, aiming at the core and limbs. Again, Chuck's guard was efficient. Exact the actions of a man who had devoted years to eliminating needless movement from his discipline. The audience observed in muted wonder. They had anticipated seeing an aged icon diminished by youth and pace. Instead, they were seeing a lesson in effectiveness, the distinction between one who battles to be observed and one who battles because it defines them. Irritation flashed across Thanchai's expression. He unleashed a rotating rear strike, his hallmark technique with sufficient power to fracture bones. Chuck evaded it with such accurate timing that the force carried Thanchai unbalanced. In that fraction of exposure, Chuck could have retaliated crushingly. Instead, he merely retreated, granting Thanchai room to regroup. This wasn't about penalty. It was about instruction. Thanchai restored his balance, anger now evident under his poise. "Stop evading and engage me," he snarled, unleashing another fierce sequence. Chuck countered the blows with subtle diversions, allowing Thanchai to exhaust himself against a guard that yielded but never failed. It was like observing fluid navigate rock, Thanchai's vigor dissipating against Chuck's unyielding serenity. After a notably intense burst that struck only atmosphere, Thanchai retreated, respiring heavier now. Reevaluating, his assured grin had disappeared, substituted by concentrated fervor. For the first time, he was battling without spectacle, without engaging the audience. "Why won't you strike?" he insisted, orbiting more warily now. "Scared you'll fail? Scared you'll demonstrate to all how sluggish you've become?" Chuck's look stayed steady. "I have nothing to demonstrate," he uttered plainly. "Do you?" The query lingered between them, laden with significance beyond the platform. Beyond this instant, Thonchai's mouth tightened, something exposed flashing momentarily in his gaze before being concealed under fresh resolve. "I'll demonstrate what demonstrating yourself appears like," he uttered, setting his posture for another assault. But before he could surge ahead, Chuck did something unforeseen. He dropped his limbs a bit and provided a minor, nearly unnoticeable inclination and offer. "Then advance," he uttered softly. "Demonstrate who you truly are." For a pulse, hesitation crossed Thonchai's expression, but he was too dedicated to his course to alter now, too enveloped in his own legend to contemplate another route. With a keen yell that sliced the venue's quiet, he rushed ahead, gathering every bit of his impressive ability for one conclusive onslaught. What transpired next would be viewed online millions of times in the ensuing days, dissected frame by frame, debated by martial arts specialists globally. Yet no analytical review could entirely convey what the present audience saw the instant when myth turned tangible before them. Thonchai's assault was flawless, a blazing, swift sequence that had gained him his moniker and his perfect record. Any other rival would have succumbed to this tempest of accurate blows. But Chuck Norris wasn't any other rival. As Thonchai's right limb stretched toward Chuck's features with contest-ending power, the senior fighter performed a method so pristine, so ideally timed, it appeared to develop in delayed pace for those observing, a subtle weight transfer, an exact counter that diverted Thonchai's striking arm just beyond Chuck's ear. And then the response blow. Chuck's roundhouse strike developed like verse, efficient, elegant, ruinous in its plainness. There was no squandered vigor, no signal, no dramatic preparation. One instant his foot was grounded. The next it linked exactly with Thonchai's side with a noise that echoed through the abruptly silent venue. Thonchai stiffened mid-action, eyes expanding in astonishment. For a hanging instant he stayed vertical as if his frame hadn't yet acknowledged what had occurred. Then his joints folded and he dropped to the surface like a puppet with severed threads. Chuck promptly retreated, making no action to pursue. There was no festivity, no elevated limbs in success, no engaging the audience. He merely resumed his balanced posture, observing carefully as Thonchai lay still on the surface. For 3 pulses the venue held its shared inhalation. Then, like a barrier rupturing, noise burst, inhalations, yells, and then clapping building into a booming cheer that seemed to vibrate the building's very base. Health workers rushed onto the platform encircling Thonchai's still form. Chuck retreated further, providing them area to function, his expression displaying its first genuine feeling of the evening. Worry for his downed rival? The audience was standing now, devices elevated to record the consequences of what had just happened. The intonation started again, growing from dispersed voices into a unified boom that occupied every part of the venue. Chuck, Chuck, Chuck. But Chuck wasn't attending to the praise. His gaze was locked on Thonchai, observing closely until he saw the young competitor's lids blink open. Saw him answer the health worker's queries. Only then did the strain in Chuck's frame relax a bit. Noise tone pierced the disorder, though she was evidently working to keep expert separation. "Everyone, please stay composed. Health personnel are caring for our title holder, and we request your esteem and tolerance in this instant." Chuck turned to the cords, readying to depart as silently as he had arrived. But before he could exit, Thonchai's tone, feebler but still bearing his typical boldness, reached him. "Hold on," Chuck halted, rotating back to see Thonchai shoving aside the health worker's palms, laboring to rise despite their objections. Their gazes met across the platform, the young title holders filled with bewilderment and something profounder, more open, the expert's constant, tolerant awaiting. In that hanging instant between them, something transferred unspoken but deep, an acknowledgement, a potential, a start rather than a conclusion. The audience quieted again, sensing the importance of what was developing before them. This was no longer about display or amusement. They were seeing something unprocessed and authentic, an instant of honesty between 2 combatants that surpassed the bodily interaction that had preceded it. Thonchai gulped visibly, his habitual conceit removed, leaving only the youth under the facade. When he uttered again, his tone resonated through the silent venue with aching clearness. "Instruct me." The 2 terms lingered in the atmosphere like vapor, altering everything. "Instruct me." Not an order but a plea. Maybe the first authentic one Thonchai had issued in years. The health workers froze around him, uncertain whether to proceed their check or grant space to this unforeseen instant. Chuck Norris positioned entirely still, evaluating the downed competitor with cautious judgment. The group held its shared inhalation, detecting that something deep was developing before them. Something beyond the bodily competition they'd observed moments prior. Thanchai's expression, usually lively with arrogant surety, now displayed unfiltered openness. The impact that had felled him had done more than daze his frame. It had fractured the character he'd built, disclosing the inquisitive youth beneath the performer's veil. Please, he appended, the term snagging a bit in his throat. Unaccustomed and challenging, Chuck advanced then, traversing the gap between them with controlled strides. The audience stayed muted, the only noises the gentle tread of his feet on the surface and the far-off snap of lens shutters. He halted before gazing down at the young competitor who was still upheld by the health workers. For an extended instant, Chuck uttered nothing. His expression revealed neither success nor critique, only deliberate contemplation. When he ultimately spoke, his tone was subdued, intended mainly for Thanchai rather than the observing thousands. Growth starts with modesty, he stated, not with terms but with deeds. Thanchai gulped visibly, a spark of his former defiance crossing his traits before fading into something more real. He started, then halted, unsure how to continue. The act was absent, leaving only the individual. Chuck offered his palm, not to aid Thanchai up, but as a motion between peers, a commencement. Thanchai gazed at the extended palm as if it were something alien, something he'd overlooked how to identify. After a pulse's wavering, he extended and seized it solidly. The contact appeared to anchor him, to draw him back from whatever edge he'd been teetering on. The initial teaching, Chuck uttered softly, is already complete. He let go of Thanchai's palm and rotated, proceeding toward the cords with the same leisurely speed that had defined his arrival. The audience stayed strangely silent, detecting that cheers or applause would somehow devalue what they were observing. As Chuck slipped between the cords, Noi appeared to regain her expert poise. She advanced, mic in grasp, clearly planning to contextualize this unusual instant for the viewers. But before she could utter, Chuck lifted a palm, a soft request rather than a directive, and she quieted again, grasping instinctively that terms would only lessen what had transpired. Chuck descended the stairs, his actions smooth and managed despite his years. At the edge, authorities and guards retreated, forming a path for him. Nobody attempted to halt him. Nobody tried to direct him. There was a shared acknowledgement that this individual required no guidance. Behind him on the platform, Thanchai had forced himself upright, dismissing the ongoing worry of the health workers. His gaze never departed Chuck's withdrawing shape. His look an intricate blend of feelings, bewilderment, esteem, and something like realization. "Hold on," he proclaimed, his tone still unsteady. "What follows now?" Chuck halted at the venue floor's border but didn't rotate. "Now," he stated, tone carrying just sufficiently for Thanchai and those closest to overhear. "You determine who you wish to become." With that, he proceeded walking, advancing through the group that separated before him like fluid around rock. Nobody extended for photos or signatures. Nobody shouted his name or requested notice. There was instead a venerating quiet, an unvoiced comprehension that they were in the company of something uncommon and precious. On the platform, Thanchai stood immobile, the meaning of Chuck's terms enveloping him. For perhaps the initial occasion since he'd initiated his combat path, he was faced with a query he couldn't resolve with his strikes or his conceit. Who did he wish to become? The enchantment was disrupted by Noi, who ultimately found her tone. "Everyone," she declared, "we have just observed something remarkable." She appeared to hunt for more fitting terms and discovering none, merely proceeded. "We will pause briefly before our following planned match. Please stay in your places." As the main illumination rose a bit, the group started to move. An increasing hum of discussion filling the venue as individuals turned to their companions, attempting to comprehend what they had viewed. Online alerts sounded throughout the area as segments of the short but deep meeting propagated across the web at rapid pace. Chuck persisted in his lone path through the venue, advancing with silent intent toward the departure. "Venue personnelle." Opened his route with subtle motions, keeping enthusiastic admirers distant. Yet despite the thousands of gazes upon him, Chuck appeared completely solitary in his reflections, centered in a serenity that nothing could unsettle. Near the passage that led from the venue floor, a youthful boy of maybe 10 years slipped past the guard line, nearing Chuck with wide wonder. A guard advanced to block him, but Chuck lifted a palm, halting the individual with a small motion. Chuck knelt to the boy's height, his actions showing none of the rigidity one might anticipate from a man his age. The boy uttered quick Thai, his tone too gentle to resonate, his palms gesturing excitedly. Chuck attended with tolerance, his seasoned expression softening into something nearing a grin. When the boy concluded, Chuck replied in basic Thai terms that made the child's expression illuminate with amazement. Chuck placed a soft palm on the boy's joint, uttering something else that made him position straighter, his torso expanding with pride. Then Chuck arose and proceeded toward the departure, leaving the radiant child to be gathered by his struck parent. As Chuck reached the opening of the departure passage, he halted and rotated, absorbing the venue one final time. His gaze moved up to the platform where Thanchai still positioned, having declined to depart despite the health worker's persistence. Their gazes met across the gap. The young title holder and the maturing icon, linked by something deeper than battle or rivalry. Chuck provided a single, nearly unnoticeable inclination, recognition, test, and offer all at once. Then he rotated and vanished into the shadows of the passage in his aftermath. He left an altered area. The charged vigor that had occupied the venue earlier, the thirst for blood, the harsh thrill, the desire for display, had been substituted by something more reflective. Discussions were subdued, considerate. Individuals examined the recordings they'd captured on their devices with looks of amazement, rather than the typical indirect excitement. In the control area, high above the venue floor, the occasion leader pressed digits to his ear device, attending to pressing updates from broadcast leaders.
"Are you viewing these figures?"
came the thrilled tone in his ear. "Online platforms are erupting. Chuck Norris icon is popular globally. We need to capitalize on this. Bring him back for a discussion." The leader shook his head gradually, observing the empty passage where Chuck had vanished. "He's departed," he uttered simply, "and I don't believe anyone's going to persuade him to return for a quote. Then secure the other one. What's his title? Thanchai. We require feedback, feeling, something for the summary clip." The leader looked toward the platform where Thanchai had ultimately agreed to accompany the health workers to the check area. Unlike his typical parading departure, the young competitor advanced with restrained consciousness, his expression thoughtful rather than victorious. I think the leader uttered cautiously, "We should grant him some interval." In the check room, Thanchai positioned on the edge of a surface, yielding to brain checks with atypical endurance. The physician directed a beam into his gaze, verifying response while a caregiver measured his vital signs. His overseer lingered nearby, device to his ear, expression oscillating between worry and strategy. "The backers are frantic," the overseer whispered, shielding his device's mic. "They want to confirm if you're fine, if you're going to issue a declaration, if not currently," Thanchai uttered quietly, his tone lacking its usual sharpness. The overseer blinked in astonishment. "What?" I said, "not currently." Thanchai's pitch was resolute but not furious. "I need to reflect." The physician completed his check, retreating with a look of expert contentment. No indications of brain injury. The strike was ideally positioned, sufficient power to drop you, not enough to inflict harm. He shook his head in reluctant praise. Impressive restraint. Thanchai inclined absently, his thoughts elsewhere. "Where did he proceed?" he inquired abruptly. The physician shared glances with the caregiver. "Mr. Norris, I think he exited the venue. Did anyone accompany him? Did anyone converse with him?" The overseer advanced. "Why do you concern? Listen, we need to stay ahead. I'm considering we frame it as a promotion act. State it was arranged throughout to boost your fresh beverage agreement. We'll state cease." Thanchai lifted a palm, his look stiffening into something fresh. Not the staged fervor he displayed for lenses, but authentic determination. "That's not what transpired. I'm not going to deceive about it." "But your persona, my persona," Thanchai uttered slowly, testing the terms, "needs to transform." The overseer's mouth opened and shut, no terms emerging. This was so distant from the plan he'd come to anticipate from his star competitor that he had no prepared reply. Thanchai arose, loosening his joints, testing his stability. He felt bodily sound. The strike had been accuracy itself, enough to fell him. Not enough to harm, but within something essential had altered. The encounter of being so effortlessly managed, of having all his ability and pace made irrelevant, had opened something inside him. An entrance he hadn't realized was shut. "I need to locate him," he uttered abruptly. The physician frowned. "You should relax. Even without brain injury, your frame has endured." "I'm sound." Thanchai advanced toward the entrance with fresh intent. "I need to locate him before he's departed." His overseer hurried to trail. What are you planning to do? What are you planning to utter? We need to align the communication here. Thunchai halted in the opening, rotating to face the older individual with a clarity that hadn't existed before. For once, he uttered softly, I'm not going to utter anything. I'm going to attend. He stepped into the corridor, advancing with growing urgency toward the venue's back departure. Staff and authorities retreated, observing him pass with looks ranging from worry to interest. Thunchai was altered, the strut absent, substituted by concentrated purpose. Outside in the muggy Bangkok evening, a modest group of dedicated admirers had assembled near the elite departure, hoping for a view of stars leaving the occasion. Guards formed a barrier, maintaining them at a polite distance from the dark vehicles waiting to carry the officials. Thunchai pushed through the venue doors, gaze scanning the setting urgently. A wave of identification passed through the waiting admirers' whispers, indicating devices lifted to record his unforeseen presence. For once, he disregarded them entirely, advancing straight to the guard leader. Chuck Norris, he uttered without introduction. Where did he proceed? The guard chief evaluated him coolly. Mr. Norris departed 10 minutes prior. Personal transport to where? Which lodging is he at? The individual's look hardened further. That detail is private. Mr. Jeruin. Thunchai passed a hand through his damp locks, frustration mounting. I need to converse with him. It's essential. Perhaps you should have contemplated that before insulting him before thousands, the guard chief replied, his expert facade cracking a bit to disclose personal disapproval. The terms impacted like a bodily strike. Thunchai retreated a step, the accuracy of them absorbing. He had constructed his path on insolence, on handling rivals as ladders rather than companions on the same journey. And now, when he ultimately met someone whose insight he urgently required, that same insolence had sealed the entrance. His frame sagged a touch, the awareness pressing on him bodily. You're accurate, he conceded softly. The guard chief's look softened slightly at this unforeseen modesty. He glanced around to confirm they weren't overheard, then bent closer. The ancient shrine in Lumpini Park, he uttered, tone barely above a murmur. He requested the driver to transport him there. Said he desired to view it under moonlight before his departure tomorrow. Thunchai's gaze widened. Thank you, he exhaled. Authentic appreciation in his tone, perhaps for the first occasion since he'd become title holder. The guard chief straightened, expert mask restored. I don't comprehend what you're referring to, Mr. Jeruin. Please retreat from the guard boundary. Thunchai inclined. Grasping the individual's stance, he rotated away, disregarding the shouts of admirers and the beaming lenses. Advancing with intent toward the row of cabs waiting beyond the venue's boundary. Behind him, his overseer emerged from the structure, device still gripped to his ear, expression twisted with irritation. Thunchai, he shouted. Where are you heading? We have the after-contest media session. The backers are awaiting, but Thunchai didn't rotate back. For the first occasion in his rapid path, something mattered more than backers. More than lenses, more than the meticulously built persona he'd created. Something genuine was awaiting him, if he had the bravery to follow it. As he entered the rear of a cab, providing directions to Lumpini Park, he glimpsed his image in the glass. The features that gazed back were known yet unfamiliar. Still his traits, but somehow stripped of the stage shield he'd worn for so long. Who do you wish to become? Chuck had inquired him as the cab departed from the venue, blending into the glowing disarray of Bangkok's night flow. Thunchai grasped he was ultimately prepared to pursue a response. The cab navigated through Bangkok's crowded paths, glowing reflections off its panes in vibrant lines. Inside, Thunchai positioned uncharacteristically motionless, revisiting the venue's occurrences with aching precision. Each decision that led to his disgrace now appeared evident, a root of conceit with only one feasible conclusion. Lumpini Park, the driver declared, stopping at the tour. Edge. Thunchai compensated and exited, surrounded by the park's comparative quiet, despite the delayed hour. Pairs walked linked. Senior practitioners flowed through slow exercises under lamps. Visitors roamed with manuals lit by devices. But which shrine had the guard chief indicated? Lumpini held multiple holy areas. Thunchai directed himself and proceeded toward the park center with resolute steps. A odd feeling settled over him, openness. Without his group, without lenses tracking every action, without his staged exterior, he felt revealed. Just a youth advancing alone, bearing the weight of his choices. He passed a man-made pond reflecting urban glow. Ahead, a classic Thai structure appeared from a cluster of foliage. Its pointed top, lit by faint base beams. Even from afar, Thanchai could discern a lone shape seated on its steps, outlined against the mild radiance. His speed slowed, doubt increasing with each stride. What would he utter? The assurance that had driven him from the venue weakened as truth set in. Chuck Norris positioned entirely motionless, gaze shut, palms resting lightly on his knees. He seemed to be contemplating, his respiration controlled. His stance exemplifying the equilibrium Thanchai had always imitated, but never truly comprehended. Thanchai halted several yards distant, hesitant to disrupt the elder's tranquility. For an instant he merely observed, absorbing the silent dignity that appeared to radiate from Chuck like an unseen power. Without opening his gaze, Chuck uttered, "You located me." No astonishment in his tone, just plain recognition. Thanchai shifted restlessly. "The guard informed me where you'd proceeded." "And why did you trail?" The query hung in the humid night atmosphere, seemingly basic yet incredibly intricate. Thanchai opened his mouth to provide one of his rehearsed replies. Something smart, something planned, but found the terms lodged in his throat. "I don't comprehend," he conceded, the honesty surprising even himself. Chuck opened his gaze, evaluating the young competitor with mild judgment. "That," he uttered softly, "is a superior start than surety." He motioned to the vacant space beside him. "Position." Thanchai wavered, then advanced, lowering himself a polite distance from Chuck. For an extended instant, neither uttered. Night noises encircled them. Far-off flow, tunes from vendors, the soft ripple of a water feature. "I'm regretful," Thanchai burst suddenly. "For what I uttered on the platform, I didn't." Chuck lifted a palm, halting him. "Terms matter," he stated, "but they're inexpensive. Everyone provides terms when they're exposed. What matters is what preceded and what follows." Thanchai inclined slowly. "I've never been felled before," he uttered, shifting direction. "Not in rivalry, not in practice, never." A trace of a grin touched Chuck's lips. "There's always someone superior. Even for you?" "Especially for me." Chuck rotated toward the sacred figure visible through the shrine's open entrances. "The instant you think you've attained the peak is the instant you start to descend." Thanchai followed his gaze. "Considering this all my existence," he uttered gradually. "Combat has been about demonstrating something, about being observed, about displaying everyone who questioned me that I was superior." Chuck inclined, awaiting. "But you," Thanchai labored to express the insight building since their meeting. "You don't need to demonstrate anything. You don't concern if people observe what you can accomplish. Why? Because the view that matters most is the one you hold of yourself," Chuck uttered simply. "And you can't deceive yourself about whether you've performed the labor, whether you've revered your craft, whether you've esteemed your rivals." The term struck Thanchai like bodily impacts, revealing the empty core of everything he'd constructed. "I haven't," he conceded, tone barely audible. "Not for an extended period." Chuck rotated to gaze at him directly, his stare neither blaming nor pardoning, simply existent, witnessing. "Why do you battle?" he inquired. Thanchai contemplated the query honestly, perhaps for the first occasion. "I was impoverished," he started hesitantly. "My kin had nothing. My parent departed when I was 4. My mother sanitized lodgings, labored 2 positions. We resided in one space in Klong Toei area." He halted, recollection surging back. "Local youths would battle for funds. Minor wagers. Visitors observing sometimes. I was quick, had sound senses, began succeeding, bringing home funds." Chuck attended without disruption, his focus total. "A coach observed me when I was 12. Said I had innate gift, brought me to his facility, instructed me proper Muay Thai." Thanchai's tone softened. "My mother wept when I informed her. Said, 'Now I wouldn't conclude deceased in a passage like my parent.'" He gazed at his palms, the carefully bound joints, toughened skin built over years. "At first I battled to aid my kin, to provide my mother a superior existence. But then arrived the notice, backers, acclaim." He faded, the path of his decline abruptly clear. "I began to adore that more than the craft itself." "Acclaim is like sweetener," Chuck uttered after an instant. "Pleasant on the palate, but it can't sustain you. It can't support you when the beams fade and you're solitary with yourself." Thanchai inclined, sensing the accuracy of this in his essence. "How do you rediscover your route when you've strayed from the path?" Chuck rotated to the sacred figure again. "You commence anew," he uttered simply. "You revert to basics. You train not for others' gazes, but for the training itself. You discover modesty before your craft. And if it's too delayed, if you've proceeded too far down the incorrect path, it's never too delayed to alter course, Chuck uttered with certainty. The history forms us, but it doesn't have to determine us. Thangchai sensed something alter within him. Not a striking change, but the silent start of one. A beginning planted that might with attention develop into something valuable. That strike, he uttered abruptly. The one you felled me with. I never anticipated it. A grin touched Chuck's lips. Because you were gazing at my expression, attempting to interpret feelings, awaiting for signaled purposes. But true method doesn't begin with the part that attacks. It starts in the center, in the core, in the essence. Thangchai contemplated this. Could you demonstrate me? Chuck evaluated him for an extended instant, measuring his genuineness. Then he inclined once and arose with smooth elegance. Rise. And in the peaceful haven of Lumpini Park, under ancient foliage and stars partly obscured by Bangkok's radiance, an expert began to instruct and a title holder began to grow. 6 weeks afterward, Rajadamnern Stadium vibrated with expectation once more. The same audience, the same charged mood, the same anticipation of display. But something basic had transformed. Noifan Priya modified her ear device, surveying the full venue while examining her records before the primary event. Her maker's tone crackled in her ear. Are you certain about these modifications to the opening? He inquired. Doubt clear? The advertisers want us to emphasize the rebel aspect. That's what moves seats. The backers are anticipating the lightning image they've funded. Trust me, Noi replied, a silent certainty in her tone. Something's altered. I observed his concluding practice yesterday. This isn't the same competitor who departed this venue 6 weeks prior. Her maker exhaled audibly. Your decision, but if viewership falls, it's on you. We're broadcasting in 3 minutes. Noi inclined to herself, adjusting her attire. In 15 years of hosting Muay Thai occasions, she had cultivated an instinct for the activity's patterns and stories. What she had observed in Thangchai's practice space yesterday wasn't a promotion tactic or a brief shift. It was change at the core level. The venue beams dimmed exactly on plan, centering focus on the platform at the heart. The audience's cheer reduced to an expectant whisper. Noi inhaled deeply and started her opening. Her tone resonating through the packed stadium with expert clarity. Everyone, welcome to Rajadamnern Stadium for this evening's Muay Thai title match. She halted, permitting the vigor to mount. 6 weeks prior, in this exact venue, we observed an instant that has since turned legendary. A confrontation between ages, between viewpoints, between methods to martial arts. On the massive displays hanging above the platform, recordings played of the now renowned meeting between Thangchai and Chuck Norris. The audience whispered, many lifting devices to capture, preserving their attendance at an occasion that had joined martial arts history. That evening, Noi proceeded. We viewed something uncommon in our contemporary world, an instant of pure honesty, an instant when the heart of martial arts surpassed display and performance. In the elite section, backers fidgeted uneasily. This wasn't the high-vigor, confrontational opening they had foreseen. Several leaders bent together, murmuring urgently, glancing at their devices where interaction data would soon disclose the viewer's feedback. This evening, Noi pressed forward. Undaunted, the unchallenged title holder returns to protect his crown against the top challenger. But first, a moment of esteem for a genuine icon of our activity. The display shifted to display Somsak, the bull Charonrang positioning at the edge, fully healed from the defeat he'd endured 6 weeks prior. The audience burst in applause, many rising to exhibit their gratitude for the seasoned competitor. Somsak recognized the welcome with a modest greeting motion, inclining slightly. His gaze, however, was locked not on the audience, but on the passage from which the competitors would soon appear. And now, Noi declared, her tone rising with the instant's vigor, please greet the challenger from Myanmar. With 33 successes, and only 2 losses, the Tiger of Yangon, Minhatet Aung. The challenger appeared to a strong welcome, advancing with the smooth assurance of a competitor at his best. Unlike many who had faced Thangchai before, Minhatet bore no evident grudge, no fabricated conflict. He executed his classic entry ceremony with commitment and concentration, revering the 4 sides of the platform before assuming his spot. As Minhatet finished his ceremony and positioned in his side, an expectant quiet descended over the venue. This was the instant when Thanchai usually made his flashy arrival complete with thumping tunes, intricate beam effects, and provoking motions designed to maximize both praise and disdain from different parts of the audience. And now, Noi uttered, her tone softening a bit, "You're protecting title holder from Bangkok, Thailand, with a flawless record of 26 successes, no losses, the competitor known as Lightning." The tunes that started were not Thanchai's typical entry track, with its forceful rhythm and boastful words. Instead, classic Thai tunes flowed through the venue. The timeless sounds of reeds and percussion that had joined warriors for ages. The audience's whispers grew puzzled, then quieted as Thanchai emerged at the top of the entry path. Absent was the sparkling cloak with its thunder decorations. Absent were the group of attractive companions, the guard detail, the elaborate routine designed to position him as a star rather than a martial artist. Instead, Thanchai advanced alone, wearing a plain white head wrap and the classic arm cords that had adorned Thai competitors since before the activity became a worldwide sensation. His look was neither his signature arrogant smile nor an artificially grave contest expression, but something more authentic, concentrated, existent, clear-sighted. In the forward row, a backer leader whispered into his device, "What is this? Where's the image we funded?" But his tone was lost in the mounting whisper of the audience, a noise not of disillusionment but of shared realization that they were observing something unforeseen and genuine. Thanchai advanced down the path at a controlled speed, his stare direct, his vigor contained rather than expansive. When he reached the platform, he executed the classic Y crew ceremony with gradual, intentional accuracy, revering his instructors, his legacy, and the craft itself with each action. The audience observed in astonished quiet, seeing what appeared like an entirely different competitor from the one they had come to anticipate. In the elite section, Somsak bent forward, gaze narrowed in evaluation, a slight grin touching his lips. When Thanchai finished his ceremony, he neared the platform's center where the official and his rival awaited. He provided Minhatet a respectful greeting, which the surprised challenger returned after a moment's hesitation. The official delivered his guidelines, which both competitors acknowledged with inclinations rather than the usual intense gaze contests. As they rotated to return to their sides, Minhatet uttered quietly to Thanchai. "I anticipated more words," he stated, a trace of bewilderment in his tone. Thanchai met his stare steadily. "This evening is about the craft," he replied plainly. Nothing further. The signal rang and the contest commenced. What developed over the next 5 sessions wasn't just a title match. It was a disclosure. Thanchai battled with a purity of method that had been previously hidden by his performance. His blows were pristine, exact, ruinous in their effectiveness rather than their severity. There was elegance in his motion, a rhythm that spoke of innumerable hours refining each shift, each chain. When he gained advantage, he didn't engage the audience or ridicule his rival. He simply readjusted, continuing the unyielding pressure of technical superiority. His gaze remained concentrated, existent, never shifting to the lenses or scanning the audience for approval. Minhatet, an excellent competitor in his own regard, matched ability for much of the contest. The two combatants pushed each other to remarkable levels, neither seeking to demean the other, both revering the exchange with their complete dedication. By the 4th session, the audience's vigor had transformed entirely. The thirst for blood, that had defined prior contests, the harsh anticipation of disgrace, the indirect thrill of control had yielded to something rarer and more precious: gratitude. Devices were lowered as observers found themselves fully existent, unwilling to miss an instant of the display before them, too involved to concern about recording it for online platforms. In the concluding session, Thanchai created an opening with a ideally timed deception, following it with a ruinous slash strike that dropped Minhatet to the surface. The official immediately intervened, counting as the challenger labored to regain his footing. The former Thanchai would have paraded the platform, limbs raised, engaging the praise of the audience, perhaps even mocking his downed rival. This Thanchai did something altered. He retreated to his side, granting his rival space, displaying esteem for the courageous effort Minhatet had provided. When the count reached 8 and it became evident the challenger could not proceed, the official ended the contest, indicating Thangchai as the victor. The audience burst, their feedback more intricate than simple festivity. There was gratitude, esteem, perhaps even a touch of wonder at the change they had observed. Thangchai neared his downed rival, extending a palm to assist Minitet to his feet. The two combatants embraced briefly, a motion of shared esteem that would have been unimaginable from the Thangchai of 6 weeks prior. Noi entered the platform, mic in grasp, nearing the title holder for the standard after-contest discussion. Lightning, she started using his combat title, a remarkable display and a successful crown protection. But I must inquire, we've viewed a different competitor this evening. What altered since your last presence on this platform? Thangchai took the mic, his look reflective. For an instant, he seemed to be contemplating what version of himself to present to the world, observing through innumerable lenses and displays. I recalled something I had overlooked, he uttered finally, his tone clear and direct. Muay Thai isn't just an activity or a route to acclaim. It's a craft that deserves esteem, a journey that demands modesty. He halted, gazing out over the audience. 6 weeks prior, I was instructed a teaching by a true expert, not just about combat, but about being deserving of the gifts we're provided. Noi's expert poise slipped a bit, genuine feeling showing through. Are you mentioning your meeting with Chuck Norris? Thangchai inclined. He demonstrated there's more to power than what can be observed, more to expertise than what can be promoted. A small authentic grin touched his lips, and he reminded me that the journey never concludes. We're all learners until our last day. He returned the mic to Noi, inclined to the four sides of the platform in the classic sign of esteem, and then departed, much as he had arrived, without spectacle, without act. Simply a combatant who had finished his duty with honor. As he vanished into the passage, the venue hummed with discussion. Admirers turned to each other, discussing the alteration they had observed. Some recording feedback clips, others simply positioning in reflective quiet. In the changing area, Thangchai's overseer paced anxiously, device to his ear. I know, he uttered to whoever was on the line. It's a total re-image, but trust me, this genuineness approach could function even better for endorsements. The online figures are exploding already. People adore the recovery story. Thangchai emerged from the rinse, cloth around his midsection. Overhearing the talk, he uttered nothing, simply began shifting into his regular attire with intentional actions. The overseer concluded his call, rotating to Thangchai with forced eagerness. Excellent contest, really excellent. The modest title holder approach is valuable. Absolute valuable. I've already secured 3 fresh endorsement proposals, and the after-contest online numbers are wild. Thangchai met his stare serenely. I'm not performing an approach, he uttered softly. This isn't an image plan. The overseer's grin wavered a bit. Of course. I just mean that genuineness really connects with the viewers, and I don't concern if it connects. Thangchai disrupted, his tone resolute, but not harsh. I concern if it's accurate. He completed attiring and collected his pack, readying to depart. The overseer lingered worriedly, clearly laboring to align the competitor before him with the sellable product he'd built his path around. There's a major gathering at Skybar, he uttered, attempting a different tactic. All the backers will be present. The media, it would really assist solidify this fresh course if you appeared. Thangchai shouldered his pack. Contemplating the plea 6 weeks prior, he would have been the heart of such assemblies, delighting in the notice, nourishing himself on the praise of admirers and the financial interests of backers. Not this evening, he uttered simply. But inform them I'm honored by their backing, Thangchai added, softening his denial. But this evening, I have somewhere more essential to be before the overseer could object further. A tap came at the changing area entrance. When it opened, Somsak the Bull Sharonrang positioned in the opening, his presence commanding instant esteem. Splendid contest, the seasoned uttered, tone carrying years of insight. Your method was pure. Your essence was clear. Thangchai inclined, slightly, providing the classic greeting with genuine esteem. Coming from you, Those terms signify everything. The two combatants evaluated each other, the maturing seasoned, who had preserved his honor through success and loss, and the young title holder who was uncovering that same journey after nearly straying. "Would you accompany me?" Somsak inquired, a basic offer with deep implications. Thanchai inclined, grasping immediately. "It would be my honor." He trailed Somsak from the venue through a utility departure, avoiding the media and groups. In the muggy Bangkok evening, a plain vehicle awaited rather than Thanchai's usual premium transport. As they traveled through the city's radiant paths, Somsak clarified they were heading to his initial practice facility, a modest location where local youth still learned the timeless craft in its purest shape. That evening, in a basic facility with aged tools and worn surfaces, the world title holder and the esteemed seasoned instructed a group of wide-gazed youth, not flashy methods for online segments, but basics: equilibrium, esteem, commitment, the spiritual heart that makes Muay Thai more than mere conflict. When a courageous young female inquired Thanchai if Chuck Norris had overcome him because he'd overlooked these basics, the title holder knelt to her height and replied with perfect honesty, "Yes, that's precisely why he didn't overcome me with years or method alone. He overcame me because he recalled what I had overlooked, that true power comes from modesty before the craft." Later, as he and Somsak departed the facility, Thanchai inquired if the older competitor would inform Chuck Norris what had transpired that evening. Somsak grinned mysteriously. "I don't need to. He already grasps." "How could he?" "He's halfway across the globe." "Some teachings surpass gaps," Somsak replied. When a learner truly grows, the instructor senses it, no matter how distant they may be. And somewhere in a peaceful room in Texas, Chuck Norris gazed up from his text, a slight grin touching his seasoned expression. He couldn't have clarified why, but he sensed an instant of contentment, as if a far-off signal had rung in perfect pitch. He returned to his reading, satisfied in the awareness that some conflicts are won not with strikes or steps, but with the silent force of model, and that true expertise lies not in control, but in the modest sharing of insight from one era to the next. Coming up, we have 2 more amazing tales that are awaiting you. Just select the picture you want to view and it will transport you there. If you appreciated this clip, make sure to join. It would signify a lot.